How awesome is that? That is East Shtetl by Zusha. I love those guys. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us on this fine Monday evening? Who's first today? Yehudit Sobel from Florence, South Carolina. Nancy Brundemel right from Southern Pines, North Carolina. Sandy McMurray, Michigan in the house. Melissa Itel Jurin, good evening from Great Neck, New York. Randy Lieberman Herman says L'Shana Tova from Florida. Yeah, we're in those last few days before Rosh Hashanah, which comes in Friday night. Paula Schmidt-Klauser with us from Chicago. Hillary Strickler from Cincinnati, Ohio. Gwen Strong says a happy Monday evening from Michigan. Tom Beck says Lila Tov, good evening from Pennsylvania. Lucy Ram Johnson, shalom from Minneapolis. Bill Eldridge, shalom. Hope everyone's Monday was as painless as possible. Amen. Jacob Finley from Durham, North Carolina. Maria Gabriela says shalom. James Roth with us from Indianapolis. Donna Smith from Bahama, North Carolina says shalom. Chaim Burke from Charlotte. And you're with us from Smoky Merced, California. Deborah Varkados from Georgetown, Texas. Lisa Epstein Sachs says shalom. Rochelle Rosen says Shana Tova. Stephanie Diaz, shalom aleichem. Sharon Fran Brooks, Lebanon, New Jersey's in the house. Libby Senzon, thank you, so happy. Amanda Lewis, shalom from California. Anna Larcon from California. Wilson Tatey from Boston. Irene Kleindorf from Broward, Florida. Brenna Bloomfield from sunny Cambridge, Mass. John Shore from Sedona. Joseph Shum from Boston. Stephen Giguere from Dover, New Hampshire. You guys are fast. I need to catch up to the end of the list before I can roll off if I can. Ivis Jasenia Serrano from Kansas. Sharon Friend Brooks says, I wore my Accidental Talmudist t-shirt to teach Hebrew school yesterday. Beautiful. This is one of our shirts available in the AT store, shop.accidentaltalmudist.org. Krista O'Reilly from Millinocket, Maine. Grace Schiller, Curalf, shalom from Miami. Catherine Stewart from upstate New York. Maris Barbie from LA. Martin Smertzlis, Little Mountain in Croatia. Welcome. Adrian Araga tuning in from Oxnard, and Hillary Silver from West Hartford. Over on the YouTube side, Lynn is in Texas. Neil is in Virginia, which I'm glad to see. And I'm going to explain why in a moment. Marassa Janut with us from Atlanta, Georgia. Marjorie Holler from Georgia. And Josh Silver is Joshola from West LA. Glad to see Neil is here because Neil has dedicated today's learning with a beautiful donation. Thank you so much for your support for our nonprofit, Neil. Neil's dedication is to Sal and Nina in appreciation of the simcha shel mitzvah, the joy that we take in the mitzvah of teaching Torah to an international classroom. Says Neil, may you continue to light up the darkness. Amen. Thank you so much. Yasher Koach, Neil. May you and all your loved ones be blessed to have an incredible year filled with health, joy, meaning, and prosperity. All right, my friends, we've got to put on our thinking caps. We're going to have some challenges in Talmudic logic. Buckle up. We're going to move fast, and we got to follow how the logic of the Talmud flows. Where are we holding? This is episode 254 of AT Daily. We are on Eruvin 36. That is Lamed Vav, page 36. We're in chapter 3 of Tractate Eruvin, the third volume of the Talmud. We're going to complete our discussion of Mishna number 7 in this chapter and begin our discussion of Mishna number 8. We are talking generally about fulfilling the mitzvah to delight in Shabbos. How? By adjusting our Shabbos enclosure of holiness so that we can take greater joy in Shabbos. And right now we're studying what if the eruv that we've created to adjust our Shabbos boundary is in doubt. And specifically now we're discussing the question, did we establish a valid eruv when we established it? And was it still valid when Shabbos began? And then why did it become in doubt? Because at some point later, something happened to the eruv. For example, that deposit of food that we made to establish our eruv burned up. Or perhaps it became inaccessible because there was an avalanche. A wall of rocks fell over it, or rocks came tumbling down the hill and buried the eruv, and now we can't get to it on Shabbos. Or perhaps it was an eruv made of teruma. So teruma is part of the tithing process. So this is food that would be set aside for the Kohen, for the priest. Only the priest can eat it. As we saw, that's still a valid eruv, even for in Israel, even for somebody who's not a priest, because a priest can eat it. However, if the teruma, which is set aside for the priest, became tamei, if it became ritually impure, then the priest will not be able to eat it. So if the priest can't eat it, it's not a valid eruv. You can't make an eruv out of disqualified teruma, impure teruma. The question is, when did it become disqualified? When did it become tamei, impure? If it happened before Shabbos began, this eruv is no good that's based on this food. If it happened after Shabbos began, the eruv is good because it was valid at the outset of Shabbos, as we learned in the previous Mishnah. So when did it become disqualified? If before twilight, the eruv was never valid on Shabbos, the eruv is no good. If it became disqualified after Shabbos began, it was valid at the outset of Shabbos, and the eruv is going to be good for the remainder of Shabbos. All right, that's where we're generally talking about. Okay. And we had the wrinkle, for example, when it became buried in rocks, like a light layer of rocks. So it's muktzah, we can't touch rocks on Shabbos, but that's a rabbinic decree. So if it became covered with rocks before Shabbos began, but during that twilight period when we're not sure if it was Shabbos or not, and we could have simply moved the rocks to the side, then by the opinion of Rebbe, who says that's something that's prohibited only by rabbinic decree, we can do it during twilight when we're not sure if it's Shabbos yet or not. So then we had the possibility to move the rocks, make the eruv accessible, and then it would be a valid eruv. But as we saw yesterday, if we needed a shovel to move the rocks, well, that would be like digging. That's a biblical prohibition. And so even at twilight, we couldn't do that, even by the opinion of Rebbe. But remember, Rebbe's is the minority opinion. The rabbis who disagree with Rebbe say that even for a rabbinic decree, it's not permitted at twilight to violate it. And so if it became buried in rocks, before Shabbos, so this is not a valid eruv. We don't have an eruv for Shabbos. All right, that's where we've been learning. Now, the Mishna said, if there's a doubt when the eruv became invalid, we don't know if the rocks fell on it or if a creeping insect got into the teruma and made it impure, made it tamei, and therefore disqualified for the priest to eat. We don't know if that happened before Shabbos began or after Shabbos began. So this eruv is in doubt. So according to the opinion of Rabbi Yosef in our Mishnah, Mishnah number 7, this is a valid eruv because an eruv in case of doubt is still a valid eruv. Rabbi Meir said, no, in this case, if we're not sure when it became invalid, the eruv is no good and we can't depend on it during Shabbos, according to Rabbi Meir. Now, we have a question on our daf today. Okay, but an eruv itself, creating an eruv, this is a rabbinic decree, right? Eruvs are created by rabbinic law, not biblical law. The Bible, the Torah, doesn't say anything about creating an eruv. So why is Rabbi Meir being stringent in a case of doubt on a rabbinic decree when we've already seen that Rabbi Meir is lenient in a case of doubt on a rabbinic decree in another area of law? So the Gemara brings this case. If a person became tamei, so the person became ritually impure, for example, he touched a dead body. We're going to talk more about dead bodies later. So if a person became tamei, and what does he have to do? He has to, among other things, he has to immerse in a mikveh. So let's say he did anything else he needed to do, and his final step to become tahor, to become ritually pure again, was to immerse in a mikveh, right? So the living waters of a mikveh. It's a ritual bath. There's a lot of requirements for a valid ritual bath. We're not going to talk about those right now. But the fact is, in this case, all he had to do was immerse in the mikveh to become tahor again, and he immersed in the mikveh. But after he immersed in the mikveh, it became known to him that there were two mikvahs. He's not sure which one he immersed in, but one of them was disqualified because it didn't have enough water in it, right? So one of the requirements of a mikveh is that it has at least 40 sa of water in it. So it's just a volume of water. And it's possible that for some reason the level of water dropped in one of the mikvahs. There's two mikvahs in this town, and it's known that one of them was disqualified because it didn't have enough water in it. But the person who immersed is not sure whether he immersed in the mikveh that's still kosher or in the mikveh that was disqualified. So he has a doubt of whether he immersed in a kosher mikveh or not. In this case, is he still tamei as he was before he immersed? Or did he become tahor because it's possible that he did immerse in a kosher mikveh? The rabbis say that in this case, he is tamei, right? He is tamei because we don't know that he immersed in a valid mikveh, so he retains the tamei status that he had before. However, or says the Mishnah, and we're talking about a Mishnah, we're not going to say rabbis or who said it. The Mishnah said, it's an unattributed Mishnah, it's an anonymous Mishnah, this other Mishnah. So if he was tamei and he immersed, but he's not sure if he immersed in a kosher mikveh or not, we say that he's still tamei, he's still ritually impure. However, if the tuma, if the impurity, the ritual impurity that he contracted was actually by rabbinic law, meaning he didn't touch a dead body, which the Torah says makes a person tamei. He didn't touch a creeping thing, which the Torah says would make him tamei, but rather he drank some tamei liquid. The Torah doesn't speak on that issue. The rabbis put a fence around the Torah, and they said if you drink an impure liquid, you're going to be ritually impure. You're going to have to immerse in the mikveh. In this case, because it's an issue of rabbinic law, he was never tamei according to biblical law, he was only tamei according to rabbinic law, and the same thing happened, he immersed in a mikveh, but he's not sure if it was a kosher mikveh. In this case, we are going to be lenient and say that he is tahor. He is ritually pure. The possible immersion in a kosher mikveh is enough to render him tahor. Because it's an unattributed Mishnah, we're going to say that this is it accords with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, whenever there's unattributed Mishnahs, it's understood that this accords with the law as Rabbi Meir said it. Why was it not attributed to him is another story for another day. We've told it before. So, since we see from that case of the possible immersion in an unkosher mikveh, that in case of Torah law, that somebody is impure, ritually impure by Torah law, we're stringent and we say he's still impure. But in a case of impurity by rabbinic decree, we're going to be lenient and say that the possible immersion in an unkosher mikveh does not remove the idea that he made an immersion, and he's going to be ruled tahor, ritually pure. So if Rabbi Meir is stringent in the case, so therefore, right, since we know that Rabbi Meir is stringent in the case of doubt in the area of law about an eruv, is this to say that Rabbi Meir believes that, well, therefore, eruv is not by rabbinic decree, that the laws of eruv actually have a basis in Torah. They weren't created by rabbinic decree. It wasn't spelled out in the Torah, just like the Torah doesn't spell out the 39 categories of work which we are prohibited to do on Shabbos. We learned them out from all the kinds of work that were necessary to create the tabernacle in the wilderness. But if we do one of the prohibited labors on Shabbos, that's understood to be violating a Torah law rather than a rabbinic decree, even though it took the rabbis to make the list of what the labors are. Nevertheless, the labors are in the Torah. We understand that people made the Mishkan, made the tabernacle, and that God said, and through Moses, stop working on the tabernacle on Shabbos, even though this is the holiest structure in history. So therefore, now we're saying that the Gemara is saying that perhaps Rabbi Meir thinks, since he was lenient in that case of the doubtful immersion in mikveh, in the case of a rabbinic decree, but he's being stringent here in the case of the doubtful eruv, maybe it's because eruv is not by rabbinic decree, but rather it's a Torah law. Somehow it's according to Torah law. But the Gemara says, no, that's not what's going on. Actually, this question of the doubtful eruv, it doesn't hinge on the distinction between Torah law and rabbinic law. Rather, it hinges on the nature of the doubt. Now here, this is very good. If you can understand what I'm going to say now, this is really going to sharpen your thinking, because all the time in our lives, doubts come up, right? A doubt about what happened in the past, doubt about what's going on in the present. And some people are fearful and say, well, if there's any doubt, we should just stop everything cold. And some people are, just go ahead, gung-ho, and not going to be stopped by just a little bit of doubt. And so if our thinking is sharpened, then we can help people understand, okay, exactly where does the doubt lie? So, to clarify our thinking, the Gemara brings another case. The case is that during the night, a person touched another person, right? Like they passed each other in the hall. Well, no, like let's say the way it works is, it's sort of hard for us to understand, but in the past, people shared a bed all the time, had no sexual connotation at all. In fact, very recently that was still going on. When Nina and I studied Lincoln, it had nothing to do, with homosexuality, that men would share beds very often. Where did this happen? On the circuit, right? So Abraham Lincoln and a bunch of other lawyers, and people all the time just traveling and going to an inn. It's like there weren't that many beds. There wasn't that much heating. And people would share a bed all the time. That didn't mean anything, right? So let's say that we have two people in an inn. There's a shortage of beds. Not everybody gets their own room. They're on the hostel plan, like they're students traveling. So people end up sharing a bed. Okay, so you share a bed with this person. The two of you went to bed. During the night, you just bumped elbows or something. In the morning, the person who's in the bed next to you is dead. Now, the question here has nothing to do with foul play, what killed him. He died of natural causes, he was old, he had a heart attack, whatever. At night, he went to bed, he was alive. In the morning, he's dead. You haven't touched him, when you were awake, but you know that sometime once you knew that he was dead, you haven't touched him since then. But during the night, you bumped elbows with this guy. So you don't know if when you bumped elbows with him during the night, he was alive or dead. Last night, he was alive. This morning, he's dead. Sometime during the night, you bumped elbows. So you don't know if you bumped elbows with a living person or a dead person. As we've seen many times, if you touch a dead person, if you touch a corpse, that's a very severe form of ritual impurity, corpse tuma, and it's going to require like a big process of becoming tahor again so that you could re-enter the temple when the temple is standing. You're going to have to be touched by the waters of purification that contain the ashes of the red heifer. On 2 days, it's going to be a 7-day waiting period. Then you're going to have to immerse in the mikveh. So there's like a lot of requirements that you're going to have to go through. It's a big deal. And if you went to Jerusalem to bring your offering at the temple, now you touch this dead guy. If you are indeed tamei, you are ritually impure by a corpse, like it's going to be 7 days before you can enter the grounds of the holy temple. So it's a big deal. So the question is, you don't know if you touched a dead person or not. All you know is you touched the person next to you during the night. He was alive last night, dead this morning. We don't know if when we touched him, he was dead or not. So what do? What is the presumption that we are going to make? That's the case. Rabbi Meir holds that I, the one who touched elbows with that person, I am going to be tahor. I'm going to be presumed to be tahor, ritually pure. I did not contract the corpse tuma, the ritual impurity from the corpse. Why? Because, let's just get it right. Because the status of the person, the last known status of the person is that he was alive. So we assume that his status is living until the moment when we know that he is dead. When did we find out he was dead? In the morning. In the morning he was dead. We don't know when he died, but we're going to presume that he was alive, legally speaking, until the moment when he was discovered dead. So we're going to assume that in the night when I bumped elbows with this person, I touched a living person. That doesn't have any impact on me. I am still tahor, ritually pure. The rabbis who argue, who dispute Rabbi Meir, are going to make a different presumption. The rabbis are going to say, I am tamei, I am ritually impure. Why? Because this dead body is a known source of tuma. It is definitely impure. We don't know when it became impure. In other words, when it became a corpse that can transmit tuma. And please understand, people have been with me for a while, understand, but in case you're new, this idea of ritual purity or impurity has nothing to do with disease, with grossness, with filth, with dirtiness. It has nothing to do with that. It's simply that by law, if you touch certain things, like a corpse, like a creeping thing, like something that has touched one of those things, you become tamei, and then you have to go through a purification process before you can enter the grounds of the temple. That's all. So we just have to understand what our status is. So the rabbis will say, when you have a known source of tuma, well, then you have to assume that it was a source of tuma going back in time all the way to a moment when you know for a fact that it was tahor, that it was ritually pure. When was it known to be pure, not a source of tuma? Last night when the guy was alive. So we're going to assume that all night long, up to the time when we know he was alive, that he was a source of tuma. In other words, we're going to presume, just in case to be on the safe side, that, as soon as somebody said goodnight to him when he was alive, he died immediately after that. And anyone else who touched him during the night is also going to be tamei, ritually impure. Okay, so that's the difference in legal presumption between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. This is an area of Torah law. Rabbi Meir and the rabbis are going to disagree, not because of leniency and stringency, although there's an outcome that's stringent or lenient, but rather on what it is that we're going to presume, which status quo is going to be preserved. That I was tahor, right? I was pure last night, and I would be presumed to still be pure today, except that I touched something. And this guy was alive last night, and so we would presume that he's alive until we find out that he's dead, according to Rabbi Meir, or a different outcome according to the rabbis, who assume that because he's tamei now, he must have been tamei going back in time to the last known time that he was tahor. So if we apply this kind of thinking to this eruv that we're trying to use to shift our Shabbos boundaries based on teruma, right? Based on this food that's assigned to the priest and has to be in a state of tahara, it has to be ritually pure. Okay, so we know that the teruma was tahor before Shabbos began, because we created an eruv with teruma. So we know that at the time that we we intended to create the eruv, we didn't use tamei teruma, right? We used teruma, food set aside for the priest, in a pure state. We know that later, at some point, it became disqualified because something touched it, let's say a creeping thing. So we're not sure when it became tamei, when it became disqualified. So now, if we apply the thinking of the rabbis that, okay, this thing is tamei, so we have to go back in time to the last time it was tahor, so then we would assume that it became tamei sometime before Shabbos began, and therefore the eruv is no good. If we applied Rabbi Meir's reasoning, we might have a different outcome. No, Rabbi Meir agrees with the rabbis here, because unlike the dead person in the night, there is only one presumption rather than two. With the case of the dead person in the night, we know that he was alive last night and he was dead this morning, and therefore he became tamei and a source of tumah at some point. But there's a second presumption, which is that I was tahor last night. I was in a state of purity, right? I hadn't touched anything that made me tamei last night. And so I'm presumed to remain in that state until we have a reason to believe or to declare that I have become tamei. There are two presumptions, one involving the guy who died and one involving me. But in the case of the teruma, there's only one presumption, right? There's only one presumption that thing was tahor at some point, and at some point it became tamei. Since we don't know when it became tamei, even Rabbi Meir would agree with the rabbis that we have to go back in time and assume that it became tamei before Shabbos began. And that's why Rabbi Meir is stringent in this case of the doubtful eruv. We're not sure when it became disqualified, possibly before Shabbos. And that's why he is stringent on the eruv. Rava says, so Rava learns out from all this, okay, what we need to understand is that we distinguish the kind of doubt that we're talking about. There's two kinds of doubt. What we're talking about is a doubtful eruv, right? We're not sure if it's a valid eruv at the outset of Shabbos. But what Rava says, we need to distinguish between an eruv that we are in doubt if it was ever valid from an eruv that we know was valid at one point and we're not sure when it became tamei. So if it was valid at one point and we're not sure when it became tamei, then that's the doubtful eruv that, according to our Mishna, according to Rabbi Yosei, it's a valid eruv and we can rely on it for the rest of Shabbos. But if we have a doubt that it was ever valid, right? We're not sure, and so the case is brought of the two loaves. So this will help us understand this. So Rav Shmuel, just to summarize that, so if, for example, I made an eruv based on this teruma, some bread, and then someone comes to me later and says, you use that bread to make your eruv, that teruma that was set aside for the priest? Actually, that might have been tamei even when you took it. I don't know that was ever valid. In that case, Rava says, it's doubt that it was ever good, So that's not the case that Rabbi Yossi is talking about. If we have a doubt that it was ever valid, even when before Shabbos, but when it was established, then this is not the kind of doubt that we're talking about. We're going to rely on and say the eruv is good for the rest of Shabbos. But if we know that it was valid when we made the eruv, and we're just not sure when it became invalidated, before Shabbos started or after Shabbos started, then it's going to be the kind of doubtful eruv that we can rely on for the rest of Shabbos. All right, a different case. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak asked Rav Huna, let's say that we have 2 loaves of teruma. One for sure is tamei. It's been invalidated as teruma. A priest can't eat it because somehow it contracted tuma. Let's say a creeping thing touched it. And the other loaf is teruma that's good. It's valid. Right? So there's 2 loaves. One is tahor. It's consecrated bread that only the priest can eat, and it's tahor, so it's good. The priest can eat it. And the other one is tamei. It's disqualified as teruma. The priest definitely can't eat it. But I don't know which loaf is tamei and which one is tahor. One of these loaves, I can make an eruv out of it. The other one, I definitely cannot make an eruv out of it. But I don't know which is which. So I say, okay, I don't know which is which, but I want my eruv to be based on the one that's good, whichever one it is. We're going to keep them from touching each other. And my eruv is based on whichever loaf is good. Have I made a valid eruv? So there's 2 ways to look at this. Do we say that there was a good loaf, right? It's teruma set aside for a priest that the priest can eat because it's tahor, because it's ritually pure. It was there from the outset. It was there before Shabbos began. It's there after Shabbos begins. It's after Shabbos starts. It's still tahor and fit for the priest to eat. So therefore, the eruv that's based on it should be a valid eruv, and I can rely on it for my Shabbos boundaries, even according to Rabbi Meir. Or do we say that because there was a doubt from the outset of which loaf is which, that therefore we can't rely on this eruv, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, who says that a doubtful eruv is valid and we can rely on it? Rav Huna answered Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, who brought this question, and he says, this eruv is no good because no matter how you look at it, the food has to be edible to the priest, right? The priest has to be able to eat it. And since no one knows which loaf is good, he can't eat either loaf because he can't take the risk of eating bread that is tamei. He's not allowed to eat impure food as a priest if it's teruma. So since the priest can't eat it no matter what, the eruv is no good. It doesn't even matter whether it was valid at the outset of Shabbos or not. The doubt causes it to be inaccessible to the priest. That completes our discussion of Mishnah number 7. Now we're going to begin our discussion of Mishnah number 8. We are nearing the end of class. So if you have questions or comments, it doesn't have to be a question, but if you have questions or comments, put them in the comments now so that Nina can cue them up for me when I finish. Okay, Mishnah number 8. Now we're talking about a situation where I want to make a conditional eruv. What is the situation? We've already discussed that the type of eruv called an eruv techumen. Why do I make it? Right? Because I want to go walking this way tomorrow. I don't have to go walking that way. I have 2,000 cubits from my Shabbos dwelling that I can go in either direction. If I'm in a city, the 2,000 cubits begin at the edge of the city. I can walk throughout the city on Shabbos, but at the edge of the city, I have another 2,000 cubits in any direction from the edge of the city, or if I'm not in a city, from my dwelling. I want to go 3,000 cubits in that direction to walk to my friend's house for Shabbos lunch. I don't care about shrinking how far I can go that way because I don't want to go that way. So I make an eruv. I put a basket of food between me and that guy. I locate it let's say halfway between us. And so the first part of my walk, I'm walking on Shabbos day, since I established my dwelling with that basket of food over there in that direction, the first half of my walk is just to reach my legal Shabbos dwelling. And then the next half of my walk is to get to my friend's house, which now, even though it's 3,000 cubits away, I can do it because I shifted my Shabbos boundary. Understand that so we can understand this Mishnah. In this Mishnah, I'm not sure which way I'm going to need to walk tomorrow on Saturday. Like, I'm thinking on this on Friday, and I'm not sure if I want to go 3,000 cubits that way or 3,000 cubits that way. Why am I unsure? Two cases are given. One is it says that Gentiles are coming and I need to escape. This sounds like pretty prejudicial and horrible, but what is the case? The Gemara will explain it's a tax collector. Now, it's not that the Gemara ever sanctions avoiding taxes, okay? We always follow the law of the land. But when the Talmud is talking about a tax collector, it's talking about a corrupt official who uses the tax collection as an extortion scheme to shake down innocent people, right? So what I want to get away from is an extortionist, right? Who uses the color of he's got some kind of appointment from the government, like the Russian government or the Persian government or the Roman government in ancient times, but really he's a crook. He got that tax collecting certificate by bribing the governor, and in order to pay off the money he put out as the bribe, he's going to shake down innocent people. I want to avoid that guy. I don't know if he's coming from the east or from the west. Whichever direction he's coming from, I want to go the other way, and I need to be able to go, let's say almost 4,000 cubits in that direction. What do? I make two eruvs, right? I put one a little less than 2,000 cubits away from me in that direction, and another one a little less than 2,000 cubits away from me in that direction. And I declare that I'm going to use the eruv that allows me to escape, to go in the direction opposite where this extortionist is coming from. And if he doesn't come at all, then I'm not going to use either eruv. Then I'm just going to use my own dwelling as my Shabbos dwelling. It's a conditional eruv. And this is allowed per the sages of this Mishnah. Likewise, that's the case I want to get away from somebody. What if I want to go towards somebody? So a famous sage is coming to town and he's going to give a Torah lecture, and I want to go hear him because he's not going to get all the way to town. He can't go that far, right? His boundary is only going to allow him to go a certain distance, and I want to go meet him and learn Torah with him, or I want to honor him and welcome him. So I'm not sure which direction he's coming from, so I'm going to make two eruvs, and if the sage is coming from the east, I'm going to go to the east to meet him, or if he's coming from the west, I'm going to go to the west to meet him. Is this permitted? Yes, this conditional eruv is permitted. And I can also say if the sage doesn't come from any direction, I'm going to just leave my dwelling where it is. This kind of conditional eruv, based on information that I don't have at the time that I'm establishing it, is permitted. And then what's really interesting is that Rabbi Yehuda adds to this, in a minority opinion, that let's say that two sages are coming. Right? And there's two sages coming. And actually, first the rabbis say, if two sages are coming, again, I can make two eruvs, and then tomorrow I can choose which sage I want to go meet, which sage I want to go hear his Torah lecture. Rabbi Yehuda says, if two sages are coming, but one of them is my teacher, I learned from him personally, and the other is, somebody I've heard of, but I've never met personally, I haven't learned from him, he's not my teacher, then tomorrow when I hear which direction my teacher is coming from, I have to go to my teacher. Only the eruv that allows me to go meet my teacher is a valid eruv. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to presume that when I said I'm going to just pick one of the eruvs to go visit one of the sages, that my intention must be, even though I didn't say it, right? The presumption is that I would go meet my teacher. And so even though I didn't say it, what I meant was the direction that my teacher's coming from, that's the direction I want to go. And so that eruv becomes the valid one, and the other one does not take effect. But the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Yehuda on this presumption and say, not necessarily. Two sages are coming. One is my teacher. We are not going to presume that I want to go learn from my teacher. Why? Because the other sage that's coming may be my colleague, maybe my friend. And I may want to learn from my friend or my colleague rather than go hear my teacher. Why? Because as the Mishna teaches us in Pirkei Avos, the chapters of the fathers, the wisdom of the fathers, the greatest hits of Talmudic wisdom, it says two things. One is, who is wise? One who learns from every person. That's Shimon ben Zoma, right? So it's not that I can only learn from my teacher, I can learn from my friend. And not only that, the Pirkei Avos also says, give me friendship or give me death, by which our sages mean if you don't have a friend that you can learn Torah with, a study partner, sometimes called a chevrusa in Hebrew, then you can't learn on your own as well as you can learn with a study partner. And so I'll make a plug for Partners in Torah. If you're Jewish, partnersintorah.org will match you up with another Jew who wants to learn with somebody, and the two of you can study together. Nina has had a beautiful Hevrusa relationship with her friend Cindy. They've been learning together for many years. It's been a wonderful experience for both of them. Nina, please put partnersintorah.org, a link to that in the comments. And in fact, tonight, I'm learning with my study partner, Kurt Byron. We've been learning together for many years. We actually learned Pirkei Avos together. It was scheduled to be tonight, and he sent me a message earlier, are we on for tonight? And I said, are you kidding? On the daf that says that learning with a friend is equal to learning from a sage? Of course we're on. So we'll have our own study session tonight. Okay. That is what I've got for us today. Let me check your comments and questions. Okay. So Nina says, please welcome, everybody, please help us welcome new viewer, Nicholas Ackerman, who describes himself as a cultural Jew who is new to Jewish learning. And it's not easy to understand. You've come in on a particularly tough day. It isn't always so, complex and technical, but you're still with us. And so welcome, Nicholas. Everybody welcome Nicholas. All right. Lynn in Texas has a question. Says, wow. Talmud Bavli, Eruvin 36a, page 1 in the Art Scroll offers notes. So I have the Art Scroll and I have the Koren Talmud. Both are fantastic. So Lynn is learning out of the Art Scroll. And she says there's a note about Rabbi Yosei holding the laws of the Shabbos boundary, the Techumen, that are rabbinical and are not at all rooted in biblical law. And that's right. So we started to say, well, maybe Rabbi Meir thinks that the laws of the Shabbos boundary are actually a Torah law, not a rabbinic decree. But then the Gemara steered us away from that. And so, the rabbi saying how far you can walk, that is a rabbinic decree. Now, it's possible, according to some commentaries, that there's a Torah law, which the maximum you can walk on Shabbos is 12 mil, which is a Roman measure. It's on the scale of a mile, maybe a little less than a mile. So that's a much, much longer distance. 2,000 cubits is like, 2/3 of a mile, maybe less. And 12 mil is like 10 miles, right? So for sure, even by Torah law, you can't walk 12 miles on Shabbos once you leave a city. Within a city, you can walk throughout the city. But it seems like the rabbinic decree of 2,000 cubits is that, a rabbinic decree, truly a fence around the Torah. Let me see this. In my comment above, says Lynn, I'm confused, for I thought all along that rabbinic fences are always built around a biblical Torah law. There must be a scriptural foundation. Yeah, there's always a scriptural foundation. They can't just make it up. But they are protecting us from coming to violate a Torah law, and that can be the foundation. But how we get to rabbinic decrees is super varied, right? There's different paths to all of them. It's almost like in the movie business, we always say, every movie gets to the screen along its own unique path. There's no, there's no sure way to get a movie made, right? You have an idea for a movie, you have a script. Every script takes a different path. And all of the rabbinic laws, while they're based in Torah, somehow they arrive at those rabbinic decrees by different paths. So we can't generalize on how rabbinic laws are created. Charles Abraham Ramirez Verdugo. What if the act of bumping of the elbow, in the case of I touched a person during the night that in the morning I discovered is dead and I don't know if I touched a dead body or not? What if the act of bumping of the elbow was the cause of death of the other man? Not only is it a case of ritual impurity, but it could also be a cause of unintentional manslaughter. Yes, but there's no evidence of that, right? The what do you call it? What is it called? And I went to law school. What I'm saying is the strength of evidence required in order to assess that something is the way that it is, right? The amount of evidence required, to establish that one is guilty of killing even unintentionally is, much higher than the kind of evidence necessary to establish that I may have become ritually impure. So, we'd have to bring more evidence and understand the case at a much deeper level if we're going to analyze the question of did I, by bumping elbows, somehow kill him? We have no reason to believe that is so. But it's definitely something that would, if we had reason to believe that, yes, there would definitely be other wrinkles in that issue. Sharon Frant Brooks. I have been told that even today, a Kohen cannot participate in Birkat Kohanim, when the Kohen, that people who are descendants of priests, right? All priests, all Jewish priests, that is not something you can become. In other words, not a rabbi, but a priest who can serve in the temple. That's hereditary only. All priests, all Kohanim, are descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses, the first high priest, and only his descendants can serve as priests when the temple is standing. The temple hasn't been standing for 2,000 years, so priests don't have that much in the way of obligations in our world now, but they do bless the congregation in Israel every day. They do the Kohanic blessing. Outside of Israel, we do it during festivals, right? So the Kohanic blessing, and Sharon is saying that she's heard that they can't participate in Birkat Kohanim on holidays if they are tamei, if they are ritually impure. Is this accurate? If so, how do we know if the Kohanim on the bima meet that standard? I don't know if that's true. Because they're not allowed to become tamei, to become certainly tamei, right? That's why they don't walk into graveyards. That's why they don't, touch a dead body. Except, they only are allowed to sort of become tamei for very close relatives. And a man can immerse in a mikveh, but he's not commanded to. So, there's definitely a tradition of immersing in a mikveh, men immersing in mikvehs. Some Hasidic Jews do it every day. Some just do it on Fridays to get ready for Shabbos. I do that. Some do it for high holidays, before Rosh Hashanah, before Yom Kippur. So there's going to be a presumption, I guess, that I don't really know the laws of this. I'm not a Kohen and I don't know. We do rinse their hands. The Levites rinse the hands of the Kohen before he goes up and blesses the people. But I just can't answer. I'm not familiar with the laws of the status of a Kohen now when the temple is not standing and what he has to do in order to be able to bless the congregation. I haven't heard this teaching before. Very interesting question, though. And Yosef Shum says, Sal, just wanted to say, I love the story about the young man, the Rebbe, and the lawyer. That's one I told last week, right? I've been telling so many stories lately that I can't remember all the stories that I've told. But thank you so much, Yosef. I'm appreciating that very much. Okay, my friends. So Rosh Hashanah begins Friday night. And we don't blow the shofar during the last day of Elul. We blow the shofar every day of Elul except Shabbos as we're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, but we don't blow the shofar on Erev Rosh Hashanah, meaning Friday morning before Rosh Hashanah begins Friday night. So I'm going to try to go live and blast the shofar 3 more times in the morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I've been trying to, share a prayer or a story. Today we had a beautiful story about why the seer of Lublin interrupted Rosh Hashanah services and wouldn't let the Baal Tekiah, the man who blows the shofar, blow the shofar on Shabbos, on Rosh Hashanah, because Rabbi David of Lovell was not in the room. And why could the service not go on? So check out it's in the in the Accidental Talmudist page, just one story back, one post back before this one, the story of what did I title it? The shofar, Rosh Hashanah. Why this? I'm not sure what I titled it, but why the seer of Lublin interrupted Rosh Hashanah to wait for Rabbi David. And Rabbi David is just such an inspiring guy. It's a short story and you'll enjoy hearing it. At any rate, I'll try to share some kind of a story or prayer or teaching these last 3 days and blow the shofar in the morning so that you can try to hear the shofar if you can't hear it where you live. That's it. That's what I've got for us. Have a great evening. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday. All the best.